I grew up admiring Eisenhower. He was my hero. Don't forget.
Me too.
Yeah, I like Ike. He was a Republican. My parents were Republican. I knew very little about his war history, but now I know quite a bit about his war history. Ike was one of the worst individuals in American history. He's a dutiful lieutenant of FDR and then Truman. He rates right behind FDR, in my opinion, of being one of the worst war criminals in certainly American history and maybe in world history.
Yeah.
He was a political general. He was a commissar. Eisenhower had never heard a bullet fired in anger.
Wow.
When the war began in 1941 for the U.S., Eisenhower, I believe he was either a colonel or lieutenant colonel.
Wow.
3
Where
years
was he
later.
in World War I? Did he serve in World War I?
I don't think so. I think
So he never saw combat, right? He was never in a really. Yeah.
No. He, like I said, he was either a colonel or lieutenant colonel when the war began, which means, it's not very good because you're in the military for 30 years and that's all the further you've gone. But within 3 or 4 years, I forget, he had risen to be general, and that's the equivalent of 5-star generals. When you're a total general, in other words, that's the highest you can go. There's a brigadier general, a major general, a lieutenant general, and then there's a general. That's where Eisenhower is at. But Eisenhower didn't earn any of that, except unless you consider being a politically correct yes man is earning it. But Eisenhower was quickly moved to the highest positions because everyone knew that he hated Germans. In fact, he said it several times. God, I hate the Germans, he told his wife, Mamie.
Yeah.
And he said he was unhappy that the American army and the French, the British on the Western Front had not killed more Germans during the war. He wanted to kill more. Of course,
So that got on the promotion. I guess the Jews very much positioned him into place too. I guess you're getting to that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But Eisenhower was, for these people, the controlling apparatus of FDR, was the right man at the right place at the right time. Of course, you had a merciless individual, and I'm sure they talked to him a lot. The Morganthau plan, this plan to basically destroy Germany, period. Henry Morgenthau, the Jewish Secretary of the Treasury under FDR.
He wrote, "Germany must perish." He said that we should castrate all the German men.
Sterilized, yes. And so Eisenhower is the perfect point man for them to be leading these armies because he's absolutely merciless. Well, anyway, it was easy to kill German prisoners as they came forward while the war was going on. They come 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, and they would be mowed down, just like the Japanese were in the Pacific, slaughtered, old men, boys in the Volkssturm, the militia, slaughtered as they came forward, trying to surrender. But when an entire armies surrender in their millions, as it did with the armistice of World War II, 5 million. Eisenhower got a hold of 5 million disarmed German prisoners at the end of the war. And what do you do with 5 million German prisoners? Well, generally, you disarm them, perhaps do a little bit of propaganda with them. Then you turn them loose, let them go back to their homes, let them start getting things back in order, creating a better nation that's democratic in Eisenhower's or communist, according to Stalin. But you basically let them go back because they're through with war too. Well, Eisenhower didn't. Eisenhower put them in concentration camps, stuck them in there. And when the war was finally over and there was no risk of retaliation from the Germans against American POWs, what Eisenhower did was basically redesignate these POWs that would have supposedly been granted the same rights and privileges as Americans soldiers. Basically, he stripped them of the POW status and called them DEFs, what is
Disarm enemy combatants?
Disarm enemy forces, yes.
Yeah, got it.
And by redesignating them, he thought, and he was right, that he could do with these helpless individuals what he wanted to do. What he wanted to do was kill them all.
Yeah.
And so in these new concentration camps in the spring in Germany, and I don't know how many of your listeners know this, but spring in Germany is quite a bit like winter sometimes. And this is what it was that first spring of 1945. Put them in these camps. No clothing, no help, no roofs, no huts to live in, but worse, no food to eat, and no water.
Just a grass field. Just leave them in a field.
Yes, feed them every third day, maybe give them a slice of bread. And I'm not exaggerating with this either. Eisenhower's ambition was to, in peace, kill as many Germans as he possibly could secretly. And he did a very fine job of it. The International
He succeeded, right?
Yes, you see, the Geneva Convention, their enabler is the International Red Cross. And the International Red Cross, with all POWs of signatory nations, is capable and allowed, in theory, to go in and make sure everything's copacetic with the prisoners themselves. That's what the Geneva Convention is. It's
like the Germans allowed the Red Cross into all the concentration camps, even examined the shower heads and everything. You know, they saw everything, no problem.
Yes, and food from home, of course, you could get that. That was allowed in the Geneva Convention. And by the way, while we're at it, blacks fared just as well as whites in German prison camps. 99%, that sounds like an outrageous statistic, but 99% of all American POWs in German camps survived the war to go back home and mow their lawn, get married, have babies, things like that.
They reported that they were very well treated by the Germans. They could even get an education in the German camps. Treated very well by the Germans.
And that's what the Geneva Convention was all about. Well, that's why Eisenhower played fast and loose with these technical titles. No longer were they POWs protected by the International Red Cross and the Geneva Convention. Now they were totally his business. You didn't have a right to come in and look at them. And so Eisenhower just started the slaughter in peace. I
wonder who was the brainchild? Was this Eisenhower's idea, or was the international Jews telling him what to do? Like, who was behind him? I wonder whose idea was this?
Oh, I'm sure it was Morganthau, Henry Morgenthau, the Jewish Treasury Secretary under FDR. I'm sure it wasn't. Yeah. And by the way, when
he wrote the book, right? Germany Must Perish. He wrote it.
I think it was somebody else, another Jew.
Oh, okay, another Jew with Morganthau. That's right.
Yes.
They called the Morganthau Plan.
Yeah, the Morganthau Plan was in place all the way, till 1948, I think. And by the way, when FDR finally and mercifully died in the spring of 1945, before the war was over, Harry Truman was no better, in my opinion. Not a bit better.
Not any better.
Despite the BS about Give 'em Hell Harry and the nonsense that went on with Harry Truman and how great a president he was.
He was like a 32-degree Mason, maybe promoted to 33rd-degree Masons, totally towing the line.
I have not found anything valuable or worthwhile about Harry Truman, despite all the propaganda about what a great president he was. He concluded the war, he dropped the atom bombs.
I would like to give thanks and credit. This video is produced by my friend and volunteer George, who's a 19-year-old American patriot on the East Coast. You can see his YouTube channel here. He's been on my show as well.
By all that you hold dear on this good earth, I bid you stand, men of the West!
If you like the content, please like this video, please subscribe, and due to YouTube's demonetization efforts, please support me on PayPal.